Hello, and welcome to the Project Good podcast. I'm your host, Anne Marie Hilton. Project Good is a social impact podcast interviewing experts and advocates about the pressing problems that we face globally and hearing how they suggest we move forward in the future. The Project Good podcast is brought to you by Project Good Work. The goal of this podcast is to inspire people and organizations to develop a mindset that can move others to positive action regarding the complex social issues facing people and the planet. For June, we have a special edition episode on showing your impact. As a global society, we find ourselves being confronted daily with an unprecedented amount of social and economic problems that have layered upon each other. The need for change in so many areas has driven individuals and organizations to start working to create change through programs and the development of nonprofits. The question that often comes up are these programs and organizations actually making a difference? Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Catherine Griffin, who's the founder and CEO of ImpactableX Analytics. Catherine helps social entrepreneurs and investors leverage data that can drive impact at scale. Prior to launching ImpactableX, Catherine served as managing director at an award-winning impact accelerator, Good Company Ventures, where she built multiple global and cross-sector social innovation consortiums designed to catalyze and accelerate the application of new technologies to address the world's most pressing challenges. In 2014, she led the execution of Fast Forward, or Fast WD, a partnership between the City of Philadelphia, Bloomberg Philanthropies, and the Wharton Social Impact Initiative, designed to address the city's public safety challenges. Catherine is whip smart, has a huge heart, and a strong desire to bring positive change to the world. Let's get into the interview. In 2020, the company Impactable launched to help change-making founders bring clarity to their impact story. Impactable offers practical tools for top startups, accelerators, and funds. The tools are designed to meet users where they are, capture the real value of social innovation over time, and communicate it through analytics for all stakeholders. Catherine Griffin, the founder of Impactable, has a long history in understanding the change-making industry. In her past, she built a partnership with the Obama administration's Climate Data Initiative in 2017 called Climate Ventures 2.0. Which focused on addressing threats to food and water systems from changes in climate. Catherine has successfully helped a number of companies launch, and her work has been featured in Forbes and New York Times. Welcome, Catherine.
Hi, Anne Marie. Such a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited about this discussion. I think, obviously, I don't know what happened to us, but since 2020, I guess we're on year 4 of, what should I say, an alien society that we no longer recognize. And so, I guess if we look at on the positive spin of all the different things that we've experienced, from COVID to, a number of natural disasters, social unrest, and just, I'll say mental health crisis for individuals. We've been through it across the world. On the positive, it has really spurred people to become reflective not only of their individual lives, but as a global collective. And so with this new, what I'm calling the change movement, it does bring to light also, I guess, the need to show that are we getting better, and how do we get better? So I'm very excited about this interview because it will help people see that we're making positive progress with the things that your company does.
I'm so excited about this too. And indeed, these are challenging times, and I think it's catalyzing a lot of both reflection and action and collaboration around the world, particularly among young people. And our work really focuses on the solutions and elevating the solutions that can actually move the needle. And I think a lot of what we read and hear in, mainstream news really focuses on, the coming apocalypse and the crises that are happening. But I think it's important to pay attention to and really elevate the folks out there hustling every day to bring change and to actually foster alleviation of some of these challenges, because there's so much happening. There's so much capital going into good work. And it's really important, I think, that we champion and support and really accelerate the application of these solutions so they can scale.
Yes, indeed. What can I say? I'm a little bit speechless in these times of, of knowing, I guess, what to do. But, it is great that so many people have been, working towards different solutions. Every day on this podcast, I meet people that are doing just amazing things to push us forward in the right direction. So one of the things I think that I guess let's start at the beginning, and let's talk about change making just from a large perspective, and then we will drill it down into how we show the results, how to get there, and start to, I guess, create our ability to come together to push forward. So what, from your perspective, do you think that it really takes for people to become a change maker?
Yeah, it's a big question. And I think people can create change in so many ways, whether, you're a stay-at-home mom and you're raising children that are active citizens and empathetic to folks who might be different from them, or whether you are, sitting at a global conference table representing a country, or whether you're founding an organization or leading a company. I think there's so many different ways we can create change in our daily lives, of course. I think, our work really focuses on, scalable technologies that can address climate and criminal justice and agriculture and food and, verticals across the board. And I think, many of the folks we work with are entrepreneurs or investors. They lead organizations with resources, or they're building solutions. And I think it takes a really unique combination of skill sets and experience to sit in those chairs because in addition to driving bottom line and, building, a good business or, investing, traditionally, folks in the impact space also need to really keep a keen eye towards their beneficiaries, their stakeholders, which might be quite varied. A lot of the folks we're working with, deal with NGOs, they deal with end users on the ground, they deal with a number of intermediaries. So it adds a degree of complexity and difficulty sometimes, but it also really, I think, can be immensely rewarding. And a lot of the folks I'm talking to have deep domain expertise. Some of the founders of the companies in criminal justice reform, for example, are returning citizens themselves. And so they've lived the experience that they're trying to change. And it creates a passion and a commitment that really enables them to withstand the inevitable challenges that come from doing the kind of work they do. Or in the climate space, a lot of them are, astute entrepreneurs. They're also, deeply driven by the effects of climate change in one way or another. So I think it really just takes passion. It takes something deep in one's soul. I know that's certainly the case for me that drives us to do this work. And I can tell you there's something especially rewarding not just from, seeing people's eyes light up when they get it or see the results, but also just connecting with folks just like you, Anne-Marie, with whom, I share a common goal. We're all working towards the same thing. And so I think some of the competition that might be present in traditional business sectors is a little bit softened when working or even talking with others in the impact space, because there's such a sense of shared mission. So it's a long way of answering the question, but I think it's really about domain expertise or experience with a problem on the ground and a deep passion to get into the root causes of the problem, why it persists despite, decades of smart people working on it. What are the entrenched realities? I don't think that idealism helps. I think it's really important to be very level-headed and clear and honest about the challenges on the ground before you can really proceed. So it's a great question.
I love, and of course it makes sense because you're coming from an analytical background about, being clear and level-headed on these, challenging problems that we see in society. Because I think, we see it probably on the news every day, or you can just go to, a local restaurant and overhear a conversation, and you can see all the emotions that people have about these issues. And, they get sometimes, either to a point that they're going to cry or, or anger.
Yeah.
And so, not that, I realize that obviously we're humans, right? And we all, have this emotional component to us that makes us, a part of our humanity. But in these issues, not letting yourself go, to one extreme or the other is so important, because I'm sure a lot of people maybe heard this, or maybe I'll just say, when you were growing up, maybe your family said this, or you found this in later on between schoolmates, is not to let your emotions get, the best of you, because if sometimes you get too emotional, you can't think straight, right? And
Yeah.
so having having a tool, or the tools that you offer, are so important, because it takes that emotion out of it, and just say, okay, this is what's happening. Even though you may feel this way, like, you're angry and ready to explode, or, you want to go, in a corner and curl up and cry about the situation. Let's look at it so that you can start to take the steps forward. And so, I guess, what have you seen from, not only, I'm going to think that emotion is a big thing that sometimes holds just, people back, and trickles into the organizations. But what are, I guess you can just give me one or two things that you've seen that are really holding organizations and people back from reaching these goals that they want to achieve?
Well, there are a lot of different ways to answer that question. There's certainly funding, there's preconceived notions, there's frustration. I hear a lot of frustration. My perspective, of course, as of someone deep in the trenches in the analytics space, it's very much about grounding our work in data on the ground, so that we're not just driven by good intentions, which is, of course, a necessary component, but confirming that those good intentions are realizing change on the ground. I think that is something that is really missing, and it's a conversation that's very much forefront on the stages at conferences and webinars, and in the the back rooms or Zooms that are happening between folks on in the field.
Yes. And so I want to now kind of dive into what Impactable does. I want to start at the fun part. Hopefully, you find this the fun part of why you started your company. I always hope everybody starts their company for fun to some degree, and then kind of explain how your tools help founders and change makers in this space so that they can understand what you do.
Wonderful. Yeah, so prior to launching Impactable, I led an accelerator and fund. I joined in 2013 and had an opportunity to work with quite a few early stage social entrepreneurs, helping them to build business models that would enable them to be venture backable. And indeed, many of them have gone on to do extraordinary things with companies that have grown and scaled. While I was there, we won $1 million Mayor's Challenge Award from Bloomberg Philanthropies to partner with the City of Philadelphia and Wharton Social Impact Initiative to bring new technologies to address the city's public safety challenges. So we ran 2 cohorts of 10 entrepreneurs working in mental health and substance abuse and access to social services and police reform and all kinds of other really critical and complex challenges. Many of those have gone on to do extraordinary things, and I read about them in the headlines of New York Times. And while we were wrapping up that program, we connected with the Obama administration, specifically their climate data initiative, which was sort of a broad call to action in the absence of climate legislation at the time for tech, data, human, financial resources. And so we mounted a similar program that leveraged those resources and really channeled them towards high growth startup companies. The consortium consisted of folks across the board, from NASA and NOAA to Google and General Mills to World Bank and UN. And what happened was our partners across all of these initiatives started asking, like, how much impact have we actually had on climate adaptation or public safety in urban areas? And so we sat down with the founders and we asked them very simple questions about their impact, and they couldn't answer them. So we looked around for other resources that we might be able to offer. But those resources were really designed for much later stage, often public companies. They looked at dimensions of impact like, employee pay gap or diversity, which are great questions to ask larger companies. But these guys were small. They had teams of 5 or 10. It was really their products and services, which, when sold at scale, might move the needle on some really tough challenges. And so that's what we wanted to help them understand and articulate. And so we developed their very simple modeling approach and practiced it internally. And the companies came back to us and told us it helped them win pitch competitions and close their rounds and accelerate their growth. And the investors in our network came to me and said, we want these analytics from every company in our portfolio. And so I really serendipitously, based off of just work in the field and observed need on both, the side of preeminent institutions as well as, change makers on the ground, really just discovered this very real need and a solution that might be helpful. And so I was given some funding and a lot of encouragement to explore building a business around this. And so I spent some time talking to as many people as I could to see how big this problem was and what kind of interest there was for a solution like ours. And really just was met with so much enthusiasm and encouragement from the field. And so I really sort of followed the yellow brick road, I wanted to understand what the realities were on the ground and test and validate whether the solution we thought might help would actually help. And so that's how I arrived at Impactable. It wasn't something I dreamed up one day and felt inspired to go out and explore. It was really something I was very much encouraged to do after years of working, deeply in the space. So the passion that I have now really emerged from that exploration, from talking to people, hearing what, whether, and how they might actually measure impact now, what challenges they face, and beginning to test what solution I thought we might have.
Wow. So, you found a need, and because you were already very experienced in this space, were able to fill it, and from there it has blossomed to help hundreds of different companies, and of course, probably make a lot of other companies look at themselves like, oh, okay, well, are we doing the right thing? And I guess that leads me to, I'm going to make two questions for the next question in part one. And so the thing that I think, this is what I've seen, anyways, especially I would say probably in the nonprofit or charity space, because of course they're always looking for funding and donations and things like that. It's about, I always think some of them, where I've seen, have a hard time showing either their impact or knowing what's the most important thing they should focus on when showing their impact. Do you have any insight or suggestions for these types of organizations?
Yeah, great question. And this is one I get a lot, and it's sort of tough to answer in the hypothetical because it's so different for different organizations. But what really matters is the outcomes, right? So in a broader sort of theory of change, so to speak, there's a problem, there's an intervention, there's the stuff we do to address the problem, and we're sort of accustomed to quantifying to the degree we can the activities that we're doing. But what's really interesting are the results. What outcomes result from the work that we do? And this is often a challenge for folks because they may not still be in touch with people. It's super longitudinal work, we're doing. And so there are definitely operational challenges to quantifying outcomes. But usually there's significant insights you can glean from drawing from third-party research, for example, gathering whatever data you can from users to the degree that it makes sense, but really trying to get at whether or not the outcomes that we intend to happen actually do happen or might happen according to similar instances where this approach has been done. This is really important. What evidence can you point to that this type of solution or work generates the outcomes we think it will? This is really what everybody cares about. Usually the operators of a project or company themselves, and funders indeed. Funders really want to know what metrics are most meaningful to us as the folks on the ground. And for impact-driven folks, that's usually about outcomes. Are we achieving the results that we want to for our users? So that would be my guidance for anyone who's on the ground.
Now, one of the things, for, I would say most organizations, of course, it's hard to show their impact, but I think it's specifically hard when you are just like a startup. Let's say you had, this great idea, and that you want to, I'll take it. They're not a startup, but, I'm sure one of the things that they had a challenge with, I'm sure you've heard of charity water, of course. And, long ago they were a startup and showing like, okay, how are you going to get all of these people, enough water? That itself is a challenge that, is already like, okay, well, it sounds great, but, how are we going to do it? Obviously, the easy way to show impact would be like show people with, glasses of water, but there's of course a million steps before you get there. So if you have a startup and you have this great idea and, you don't have, a ton of data because you haven't been doing this project or had this organization long, I guess, how do you, how do you get the attention of investors?
Get started.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we apply the same sort of principles to impact that we are accustomed to and have long accepted with financial modeling. So, when you're just starting out a business, you have to put a price on your product to capture the value you think you're going to create. You have to make an estimate and about how many people you can sell it to, where and how and why. And we apply the same sort of approach on the impact side. So, draw from what's available on the internet and make some claims. Start with some claims and be prepared to defend them. How many people, how many products do you expect to sell? How many users do you expect to onboard? What sort of, how will they interact with your solution? How will your solution serve them? And then what sort of, results do you expect they'll get? Make an estimate and be prepared to defend it and make the most conservative estimate you possibly can. Impactable was really designed initially in the early days to serve this kind of client, this kind of early stage company. We now work with much later stage companies with lots and lots of data, but even they need to make estimates along the way. So, put a number down on paper, be as conservative as possible, be prepared to defend it, and then have a plan in place to get smarter over time. That's the most any funder can expect of an early stage company. You can't pull a rabbit out of a hat, right? You only have what you have. Of course, lean startup principles, always apply, impact or not impact focused. But so get started with a minimum viable, collect data as you go, learn as much as you possibly can about, the nature of your user before they use your product, and then how their, circumstances might have changed after using your product. That's really the core of what impact is all about. Change. So you can get started with this at any point. Typically, though, I'm seeing that angels and early stage investors, impact investors usually ask for your metrics. They want to know what you plan to measure and how you plan to measure it, what you're going to look for, what your plan is, really your clarity of thinking and expectations around impact, and the degree to which it'll remain a priority over time as a company scales. As you get, further along in the process, you're approaching institutional impact investors. I think expectations increase in terms of, the data you can provide and the context you can share alongside it. But at the early stages, you can get started at any point.
Now, if somebody is planning to start an organization and, obviously it's nerve-wracking when you do that, what type of organizations do you think that they would be most successful or likely to receive the most funding?
Oh, goodness, I can't really speak to that. It really depends. There's a lot of funding available in climate right now, of course. A number of funds have been started to drive decarbonization efforts. But, there's funding available across the board for education and healthcare, economic mobility, justice tech, and racial equity. And broadly speaking, I wouldn't start a company based off of funding expectations, like the degree to which or the likelihood of it getting funded. I think if you're going to start a company to drive impact, it's really got to be coming from a place of passion, and the funding will come.
I love that I guess put the goal and the passion first, and then the funders will see that, because I'm not a funder, but I have worked alongside funders, and that really does make a difference sometimes when they're trying to decide between two organizations. Being able to show your heart is really important. And then speaking of showing hearts and making a difference, I'd love to know what one of your greatest stories, or a story that you love, even if it isn't like a great story, even if it's funny or fun, of any companies you've helped that, help them either overcome something or get the funding that they wanted, or you just were like, wow, it was such a wonderful project that it left a wonderful, great impression on me.
Yeah, I mean, we've worked with so many different companies with stories like that, truly. From the early days, where I now have the benefit of time and perspective and can look back and see how far that company's grown and see them on the, featured in the New York Times, like that just never gets old. But another company we were working with provided mobile technology that helped people who were returning from being incarcerated, returning citizens, navigate the probation and parole system, which can be just very, very difficult to navigate. And so they identified the fact that technical violations, failure to appear at different probation and parole meetings, or meetings over time, were really driving bench warrants and rearrests and reincarceration. They had this unique insight, and they thought that if they could solve that specific problem, that they might then be able to reduce the rate of bench warrants and rearrests and recidivism. And so we helped them, model this out and forecast their impact potential with this solution. And they closed a $2.5 million seed round after working with us. And the funders that decided to back them came to us and were fascinated by the report we had generated for them, and were really excited to learn more and apply the same sort of approach across all of the companies in their portfolio. And so, I mean, that's just a very, simple, case study, but we're seeing that kind of effect across a number of the companies we work with. It's really so valuable to move from telling a story about good intentions. We think that this app will affect change on the world, versus actually breaking that down and drawing from the evidence, drawing from third-party research, and determining the degree to which, a company may actually be able to affect change on a problem. Like, it just brings so much color and texture and clarity to a story. And so we've seen that really unlock opportunity, open a lot of doors for companies on the funding side, but also on the sales and partnerships and brand and marketing side as well.
Wow, I love that you brought a story about incarceration, because it's not a topic necessarily that people think about for change that often. Right? Everybody's usually thinking about the environment, or children, or women, or things like that. Mm-hmm. But the incarcerated population is huge, and some time ago, I did a little bit of research in it, and it's amazing how much of an effect it has on not only, of course, the people who are incarcerated, but the communities. And then also it starts to shape our minds as a society about where people fall on, different, I guess you would say, class spectrums and things like that. So that's very cool. So now I'd like to ask you kind of a fun question. Where do you think that this, what I'm calling the movement of change is going? Right now, I would say, I guess we're on year 4 now since 2020. And since that time, obviously we went through COVID. We've seen some climate calamities. We've seen people in the streets protesting, picketing, you name it. We've seen a lot. And so where would you say that this drive for change is going? And I guess, what do we have to look forward to, and what should we, work towards to make things better? It's a big question. It's kind of like, I just feel like I just asked you like a beauty pageant question.
Yeah, it is a huge question. And, we just live in very scary times, I think transparency is number one. I think there are so many people doing so many good things, and there is more and more capital that's flowing in this direction, particularly as, younger generations assume responsibility for generational wealth. We're definitely in the midst of this transition period happening, and I think that's really exciting. And I think we don't have it all figured out quite yet when it comes to impact. There are a lot of different moving pieces, and a lot of people are working hard to try to really make it easier, I think. I think in the meantime, though, transparency is really critical in terms of, making claims of any kind, being clear about what we know and what we don't know. I think in the impact space, there's a lot of collaboration, and I think that sentiment is invaluable because, we just get so much further when working together. But it's challenging because there's a lot of disinformation out there right now. I do think that the impact movement is getting stronger. And I think it will only continue to do that. I guest lecture at a few different schools, and, top talent, even at schools where you wouldn't necessarily expect there to be a real interest, is really very passionate about this work. There are lots of signs of change and evolution towards transparency, towards, capturing impact as part of, standard operating procedure for companies in both the public sector and the private sector. Yes, it's getting politicized, but, I do believe that, this work will bend towards justice in the long run. And I think we're certainly making progress. I think we can't move fast enough, and there's plenty of headlines that, are very disheartening. But I think, I try to look every day for what I can do today, what unique skills I have been given that I can use to give something to the world. And maybe I'm biased because this is the world I live in, but there are just so many other people who are thinking very actively about how they want to make meaning of their careers. And I see roles, I see positions, I see projects, I see companies launched that you wouldn't have seen 5 or 10 years ago. You just wouldn't have. So I think it's a really exciting time. I do. We need as many people as we can fighting the good fight. And we're Impactable's here to make it more effective and scalable in the long run.
I love that. I love that answer. It reminds me of the song, of course. I'm starting with the man in the mirror. So perfect ending. Thank you, Catherine, for your time and insight. If you'd like to learn more about Catherine Griffin, you can go to ImpactableX.com. If you have a passion for an unserved community, a social justice problem, or simply want to change minds, contact Project Good at projectgood.org to start your project of change today. To our listeners, thanks for tuning in to Project Good. We're focused on what matters.